Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of The Doctor Will See You Now. How's your reading going? Or how's your listening going? Kind of things are you into? As we make this recording, we're in a beautiful summer here. And I just have to say, for anybody who enjoys football, well, it was a very interesting time for England football, England women's football. Well done, the Lionesses. Anyway, to business. Yes, yes. Unbelievable. I could get extremely excited, but I would rather get more excited about the book in hand. Well, I'd like to welcome into the consultation Emma Bamford. Hi, Emma. How are we? Are we good?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. And you?
Yes, I'm very, very good. I love interviewing thriller, crime fiction, suspense authors, but when it's somebody's debut novel, now I know it's not your debut book because I know you've published before, but when it's a debut thriller, crime novel, I get extra excited. And I don't have copy because I read online, but I can see the book. So there it is up behind you, Deep Water. And we're going to be getting into some deep water. I also say, if anybody has a fear of drowning, which I do, but I love the sea and I love sailing. So it's an exciting ride of thinking, what's going to happen? Anyway, more about the book very, very soon. Emma, the writing of a thriller novel because you have written travel books previously, is that correct?
Yeah. My first two books were travelogues, and they were about my sailing adventures. I did this mad thing about 10 or 12 years ago, and I quit my job and I answered an advert on the internet for crew wanted, and then I bought a one-way ticket to Borneo to live on a boat with a man I've never met. And
okay.
And I had
brave thing.
And that wasn't a crime or a thriller situation. That was.
I'm very glad. Yeah. Yeah.
Before I went, a lot of friends and family said to me, "Have you seen that movie Dead Calm? Do you remember that one?"
Yes.
But luckily, it didn't turn out like that, and I just had these amazing adventures sailing around Southeast Asia and the Caribbean and Europe, and so I wrote a couple of books about that.
Had you sailed before you responded to that?
Yeah, a bit. I didn't get into it probably until about 3 or 4 years before I set off. I've never sailed in my life. And then I did it. It was a hen night. A friend was having a hen night, and she's not a sailor, but she hired a couple of yachts and had like a professional skipper on each one. And the plan was we'd sail from Southampton to the Isle of Wight, literally learning the ropes, and then we'd have lunch there and then race back. And some of the women on the boat were kind of more interested in sort of sunbathing and drinking prosecco, but I absolutely loved it. And so the skipper was telling me things to do, and I was just like, I don't know what he means, but I'm just going to run around, pull these things and winch these things. And so I decided to go and learn how to sail, and that's what I did. And then I got more and more into it, and then in the end, decided I was looking to change my life up a bit. So off I went to Borneo.
There's so much in what you've told us already. First of all, what a cool friend to have a hen do in that way. I'm thinking of the traditional hen dos in Newcastle. And they are legendary, but they don't usually take place in that way. So that's really exciting. And then that thing of saying, I'm just gonna leave everything and I'm gonna go and do this. I'm gonna have a totally different lifestyle in different places. And so clearly you are a person who enjoys adventure, enjoys maybe risk taking. I don't know. So I wonder, coming to the book, we'll come back to your previous sailing experiences, but coming to the book, Deep Water, so published by Simon and Schuster, and out July 2022.
I started writing a bit creatively, and I started to write the beginning of 2 books. I did about 2 chapters of each one. One was the travelogue, and one was what would become Deep Water. And I had this decision to make: do I do this one or do I do that one? And I just found, I think probably because of my background as a journalist, I found writing non-fiction just came to me more naturally. So I put Deep Water in the metaphorical drawer, and went with the non-fiction. But it kept. I was always thinking about it, and I always wanted to return to it. So I did my first one, which was Casting Off, and then was meant to come back to the novel, but found it really hard because in fiction, it sounds really basic, but you have to make everything up. Whereas with non-fiction, I already had the bones of the story and the characters there.
Yeah.
So even though in my non-fiction there is a narrative arc that takes you through like there would be in a novel. So I kept putting it off. I'm a great procrastinator. I'm one of those people that would spend the whole day, messing around, doing this, that, and the other before actually getting down to write. So that was a years-long procrastination, and then I kind of pulled my socks up and got stuck in. But in order to write that novel, I did a draft myself, and it wasn't quite working. So I did another crazy thing, and I quit my job again, and went back to university, age 40.
Wow, I love that. Yes. Whoa. What did you do?
I did creative writing, did a master's, and because I didn't know what kind of book I was writing. I was just writing a book. I wasn't thinking about genre. I wasn't thinking about structure to fit in. I didn't know I was writing a thriller or suspense. I think of it more as probably a suspense.
Okay, yeah.
Until I was doing that master's, and I did a module on crime and thriller fiction. And then it was through that I then thought, okay, that's what this book could be, and then set about trying to make it that way. But I always loved reading crime and thrillers.
Yeah. And the course you did, it was a UEA. Yeah. And in the crime writing world, that that course has it's got a great reputation. It's like you did it there. Yeah, great. Yeah. So was Deep Water, was that your project whilst you were on the course? Did you use it in that, or did you do other writing when you're on the course?
Bit of both. So the way the course is structured, you can choose some modules where for your assignment you're doing a piece of academic writing, like an essay or an analysis, or you can choose modules where you're submitting a piece of creative writing. So I kind of chose the modules so that I could submit pieces of the novel, so that I would get the tutor feedback on that, and also from my peers on the course as well. But I also took it as an opportunity to explore writing some other things. So I wrote some really wacky stuff that might probably never see the light of day. I wrote a short story set in the Arctic, with a really gruesome scene. I think I made all my classmates feel really sick, with a polar bear with like blood on its face.
I think we need that to come out at some point. No pressure, but please, that would be great. Yeah.
And so it was a really good opportunity to try different things out, and just with no pressure, because there's no publishing contract or no expectation that anything would come of it. We just kind of play and have fun and see where it went. It seems that everything I write seems to go to the dark side.
So there's again a couple of things that you've been saying. An author that I talked to recently was saying this about that first novel where it's just you writing, and it's not that you write in to a deal, or it's not that or anything like that. Did you have that time to think about it, as opposed to when you've published that first novel and you have a book deal for another 2 or 3, then the subsequent writing feels a lot more pressurized sometimes than when you're just enjoying writing the story. I also wondered as well about you doing the creative writing course. If it, because as a journalist, well, of course you can write, and you can write to deadline, and that's an amazing skill, because there are many an author, a fiction author, it's like, deadline? what is this thing called a deadline? But I wondered, did doing the creative writing unlock certain things that maybe, the journalism style of writing hadn't helped you create yet?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think I realised how much room there was to grow, how much I had to learn. Because journalism, it's particularly, I've worked for tabloid newspapers, so it's all very short, it's all very precise, and there's no room for anything really, apart from the basic facts. You might be telling a story in 80 words, for example.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, probably the main feedback from my tutors kept being, you're writing like a journalist, you're treating this like a journalist. I think that works in giving you like a clean and maybe propulsive manuscript, because you're not the readers aren't being weighed down.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's not creating the best kind of novel. So yeah, that's something that course made me aware of, and I found it really frustrating to begin with, because I was like, but I've been working as a journalist for years, like nearly 20 years.
Excuse me, I can write. I know, my pieces tell you that I can write. It's not. Yeah.
But that was I can write that, but I can't write the book yet.
Yeah, so, and again, I think people talk about writing and being able to write, and it's not that reductive, because it's poetry, prose, travelogues, journalism pieces. It's all very different. They're words, but what goes into creating them?
Yeah, the craft, isn't it? So
yeah.
When I trained as a journalist, I learned how to structure a news story and how to write that to a particular style. And then when I learned how to write features, which are the longer pieces that you get in newspapers and magazines, again, that's a bit different. So I had to learn that. So yeah, it's the same approach with books. I don't see my own writing as like some great artistic form. That probably comes from being a jobbing journalist, but yeah, there's certain things that you need to do, and that the reader wants to see on the page or in the story structure as a whole.
Yeah. So, well, it's obviously worked, because, as we say, we can appreciate the book behind you and see it there. I'd like to start then by thinking about that special location. Now, how do you pronounce the name of the island that you've created? Amarante? Amarante, brilliant, great. So, tell us about this location, and as a good investigative journalist, I'd like to say, when did this place form for you, and why this place, and what does it mean? So, please.
Yeah, sure.
Tell us, yeah.
So for anybody who hasn't read Deepwater, the majority of the action is set on an island right in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's about 2,000 miles away from anywhere. It's called Amarante, and it's really small, and it's your kind of idyllic tropical paradise island, like soft white sands and leaning over coconut palms and little shallow waves washing up the beach. And there's nothing there. There's no electricity, no buildings, no water, no food, no shops, no communication. So the characters in the novel can only reach it by sailing boat. So they sail there, and then they kind of live this self-sufficient group sort of commune lifestyle while they're on the island, all looking out for each other. And so I came up with the idea when I was sailing in the Indian Ocean. But I wasn't 2,000 miles from anywhere. I was about 4 days sailing west of Thailand. So that's like a 4-day non-stop, keep going, and then you reach a chain of islands called the Andaman Islands, and they belong to India. There's about 300 of those, and some of them are uninhabited. And we had to file a plan with the local government and say which islands we were going to, and then off we set, and we had a month to explore them. And I'd never been anywhere like that in my life, and I just thought, A, how beautiful, but B, how remote and the kind of the interaction of those two things, you know, if you get into trouble somewhere like that, it can spiral downwards really, really quickly.
Yeah, because nobody can get to you quickly, can they? You know, and if there's no communications, I mean, if there's no signal or anything like that, well then, eek.
Yeah, and if you need to go to hospital, it's going to be, you know, 5 days of sailing before you can get to the nearest landfall. So yeah, that was my inspiration. And then the name, I wanted, because it's a fictional island, so I wanted to make up a name. And I have a friend whose daughter's called Amara, and I really liked the sound of that. It was a really beautiful sound. And I looked up Amarante, and there isn't an Amarante. There's not an island, I think, in the Seychelles. There's a little group there that's similar sounding, but it's not quite the same. Yeah, so there we go. I made up paradise.
Gorgeous, a made-up paradise, and let's face it, you know, again, I'm thinking of of the years of lockdown, and I know, you know, we're trying to be out and about and doing things, but that possibility, just to be able to go to a place like that and be free and enjoy all that, the beauty, the lusciousness, Before we keep going with the book, and the idea of being on a self-sufficient island, so you did this, but I want to take it a little bit further, and I want to ask you, having all the experience that you've had now with it, if you were shipwrecked, would you cope? Would you have a plan?
I suppose I love that film, The Blue Lagoon. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Like the whole 2-story house out of coconut palms and things. I think I'd have a go at that, actually.
Yeah.
I went through, when I was really into sailing, I went through a phase of always carrying a pocket knife with me, you know, like a little Swiss Army multi-tool thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, let's hope that if I was on the ship that was about to be wrecked, that I would have had the presence of mind to have my little multi-tool with me. But I've never tried to make a fire from you know, like a flint or rubbing stick or something. I'm not a very patient person, but I'd have a go.
Yeah, it makes me think of that, you know, the travel program that Joanna Lumley did, you know, and again, of her struggling with those things and trying to light the fire and dealing with you know, adverse conditions on a very, what, you know, was a lovely island, but things can change. And paradise isn't necessarily paradise. You create some wonderful tension, and I wanted to ask you, did that aspect, did that come easily to you, to write tension, to write the moments?
I think the tension between the characters, that just came naturally. I didn't think too much about that. But there's kind of a narrative frame to the story. So most of the action takes place with our protagonists, Virginie and Jake, on the island of Amarante with a motley crew of other sailors that are there. And then around that, it's kind of a flash forward to a naval captain coming across them. And then that joins up later. And that narrative frame came quite late in the writing process for me, and that's what makes it more of a thriller. And I think I probably got the idea from Patricia Highsmith wrote this book called, I think it's called Plotting and Writing Suspense Fiction, and she's kind of talked about suspense as being, she gave an example of there's a couple of people sitting at a table, and there's a bomb underneath the table. And you, as the reader, know that the bomb is underneath the table, but the characters do not. And that's what creates the suspense and the tension to carry through. And that example really stuck with me. So I tried to create my version of the bomb under the table that fitted with the sailing story.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I know there are people, who watch, who are, are creating stories. So that's it's a really useful tip. That is great. A tricky question, maybe, because of course you see this and you think, well, I know I did. Think about the beach. I mean, were you aware of things that you needed to avoid or didn't want to do so that people couldn't say, oh, so you've just replicated the beach? Or
Yeah, I've been to the beach in Thailand where the movie The Beach was filmed, actually.
yeah,
It was really beautiful. I spent the night there on the boat.
and there was no Tilda Swinton
No, Leonardo DiCaprio wasn't there that week. So.
either. No, I know.
Yes, so I was aware. So there were certain things that you'd think naturally you might want to include in a desert island story. So you've got the dangers in the water. So in the beach, do you remember like some characters are attacked by sharks?
Mm-hmm.
And then that shark attack is basically what sort of triggers the community infighting and falling apart. And so I made a deliberate decision not to have any sharks.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember if it was in the book, but it was definitely in the film. This is really beautiful phenomenon that you get at sea. It happens at certain times, called either phosphorescence or bioluminescence.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's amazing. It's like fireworks just appear in the water, and you can swim or if the boat's sailing along, the waves, the wake that you've created lights up like sometimes like nothing of it. It's like magic. It's really beautiful. But again, that was in the film of the beach. They go swimming at night and there's all bioluminescence, and I thought, well, probably best to stay away from that. Yeah, but I read it, I mean, years and years ago. And then while I was working on Deep Water, I reread it to make sure that there wasn't going to be too much overlap.
Mm. So no sharks, no dangers like that. Can you tell us anything around the dangers that you did create?
There are human dangers, which I think.
Yeah. Now, just to come to that. Forgive me for breaking in, but you mentioned them as a motley crew, and of course the idea that this isn't your typical tourist island. You're not going to, it's not a package tour. You're not going to be dropped off there and have a rep and things like that. So the configuration of people who sail, that breed, shall we say, what kind of people are they? I mean, I love boats. I love being on boats, but I'm not a sailor and I've never crewed or anything like that. What characteristics of those people who do that, and again, it's a massive generalization. What did that lend to the creation of this community?
Yeah, well, when I was away sailing, I met all different kinds of people, and so I drew on those. I didn't say pick up one character that I met in real life and then put on Amarante. They're all just like a mix of different people that I came across. But I would say with sailing particularly, as opposed to maybe motorboating, although I'm sure there's a lot of crossover, it's just I don't have experience with that. It's people that they want to be out of society, particularly people that live on the boats for a long time. So the kind of people that I met was quite popular with maybe older people, like empty nesters, maybe often couples, a husband and wife, and that their children had grown up and flown the nest, and the couple had always had this dream of having a boat and setting off and exploring the world. So I'd say people that are outside of society, people that are quite tough, like quite good at being self-sufficient. The idea of catching a fish and gutting it doesn't make them feel squeamish. They like that. That's adventure to them. And people with a thirst for adventure, and people that want to see beautiful places. But there's also a kind of competitiveness, I think. It can be things like when you meet somebody, or where have you been? oh, and this one time when I was in this place, and then this other time when I was in that place, kind of one-upmanship.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, or it can be a bit like keeping up with the Joneses, as it, like your neighbours, but on boats. So rather than who's got the biggest Christmas decorations or who's having a new extension built or whatever, it's who's got this boat and who's been to these places. But people that I met were really willing to help each other out. So if somebody had a problem, or if somebody didn't have the skill set that another person might have, then they would swap. So someone's good at computers, they might help somebody fix a problem on their laptop, and in return someone would do a bit of plumbing for them. So I drew on that for deep water as well.
Thank you, and for talking about that in a way that just gives us that overall dynamic that's there. But I would like to pay attention to, and you've already mentioned them, Jake and Virginie. Can you give us some background to them? Why are they, not what happens to them, but why are they out sailing? Who are they and why are they doing this?
Yeah. When we meet Virginie and Jake, they've been married about 6 months, and they haven't known each other very long, actually. It's a second marriage for Virginie. She got married when she was very young, to a much older man, and that was verging on abusive, that relationship. So when she met Jake, who is a boat builder, like a carpenter from Lymington in Hampshire, they fell in love. Her family did a bit of sailing, so she grew up around boats, like summer holidays and things, when she was a kid in France. And they are just keen for an adventure. So Jake's business is not going brilliantly, so they have the idea to buy a boat. So they put all their life savings into buying a second-hand boat in Malaysia. It's not a lot of money, and it's an old boat, and it's got problems that they're aware of, but they're confident because he works in the boat industry and is always sailing around like the yacht club and helping out with the kids' dinghies and stuff on the weekend. And because she went sailing a lot as a kid, they're confident that they can handle it, and they want a fresh start and to do something exciting and to create a bond to strengthen their marriage right from the beginning. So that's why they go sailing. To begin with, they're thinking about going to Thailand, and then they hear about Amarante and they think, why not? Well, one of them thinks why not, the other one's a bit more cautious.
And I wondered, again, you mentioned that when the Navy ship comes across their boat and they're not in a good state, shall we say, and I just wondered, as creating the novel, were you keen to create the trajectory for a relationship that was only 6 months in? I mean, this is a massive thing to embark on. Was that one of the reasons why you developed this story? A romance under pressure, and goodness me, what pressure! But
yeah, I wanted them to literally be in the honeymoon stage of their relationship, because then I thought that would the changes that might happen to them when they face various circumstances would be starker that way than if they'd already been through some trials and tribulations before. Then they would know each other better and they would know how to deal. So I thought it'd be very interesting to take a couple that are all, we're so in love, we're so happy, and then to put them in this extremely claustrophobic, hot, dark, dingy environment of a boat in the middle of nowhere, and then test them when they were there.
Yeah. Would you sail with them?
Yes, I would actually. I would trust them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be a fun trip wherever you decided to head for?
Yeah, I've sailed with a couple before actually. I spent 3 months sailing with my friends Ben and Vicky.
They didn't have to go through what Jake and Virginie went through. No,
some of the things that happen in deep water,
happened
to us on that trip.
Okay.
But not everything.
Yeah. And each of them, what are the characteristics, the traits that you most value in this couple that you created?
Yeah, well, I think Virginie is a dreamer. She's a daydreamer. And I think that was really important. If I was going to have a character that wanted to go to find paradise, basically, if she was cynical, then she probably wouldn't have gone there in the first place, and then the story wouldn't have happened. And Jake is very practical and kind of salt of the earth, and they were attributes that I thought were really important for somebody also that was going to go to a remote place like that. You have to be good with your hands. So I thought that the combination of those two together meant that practically they would be the kind of people who might do that, as in sail to Amarante. But also you've got a clash there because you've got a dreamer up against a realist, basically.
Yeah, very practical, pragmatic, and those tensions and how they play out. Having created this novel, and the journey that you take us on through that, because I know you must have, it always happens that writers, when we finally get to talk about it, this novel was long gone finished and moved on. Are you writing another novel set at sea, or are you on to something different?
I am writing another novel, but I made the executive decision to not write about the sea this time, because I've written 3 books about the sea, cruising and sailing. So this one is landlocked. There is water, there's a body of water that's visible from the house that it's set in. But yeah, nothing to do with sailing, nothing to do with the sea, and nothing to do with travel, actually. It's all based very firmly in the UK.
How did that come as a surprise to you that this worked, or were you very clear when you set off on the next novel that you needed to do this for your writing?
Yeah, I just wanted to try something different. I wouldn't say that I'll never go back to boats, because that's a world that I work in and that I know well, and I've got some ideas already about how that might work. But yeah, I just wanted to try something really different, and hopefully it will come off okay. I was still stuck with, they say writers write what you know.
And
my protagonist this time is a ghost writer. So I know about writing. I've done a bit of ghosting myself, but she's coming up against the beauty industry that she knows nothing about, and I know nothing about. So that's been a steep learning curve for me.
Great, but good opportunity for research and investigation. And if we can go back to deep water, sorry, I this often happens. It's like, the author takes me off on it makes me think about things. So back to deep water, and okay, so in the process of putting the book together, I'd like to ask you for 2 things. Is there something that in the end didn't make it onto the page that you had to sacrifice, and that you didn't want to get rid of, but you can see now that, it made sense? So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is, of all those wonderful pages, is there one aspect, character, moment, theme in the novel that you look at and you go, I created that, I did this, and that's just beautiful? Because I think when we read it, I always love to think when we get to that point and think, the author loved this. This is what they really are proud of. So I hope those questions are okay. Are you right with those?
Yeah. They're really good questions. I'm just trying to think how to answer the first one without giving any spoilers away. So there was a character that, the character is still in the novel, that originally I killed off. And I spoke to, when my agent signed me, and she read it, she said, you cannot kill off that character. because people will not forgive you for it.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I had to go away and have a think, and I decided she was right. And based on reader feedback that I've had since the book's published, it was the correct decision. So it's really interesting that there are people in the industry. It's my first thriller. There are editors and publishers and agents who've been doing this for years and years, and they've worked on so many thrillers. So yeah, they know their onions, and it's a good idea to stick with what they know.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, the decision was mine. So if I'd felt really, really strongly, then
they would have been okay with that. They would have said, we think this is best, but if you really need to do this, yeah. But again, isn't it wonderful? That idea of, okay, we want to make your novel even better. This is great, but we've got some ideas, and knowing readers as well. I think that's the thing as well. They're saying, please don't lose that character.
Yeah, because that's ultimately who you're writing for. I can write for myself to enjoy the process, but really, I'm writing for people to read it and to enjoy it. And yes, you might want to lead them up the garden path. Well, that's your job, actually, as a thriller writer.
Yeah. Please, take us on those, those alleys and whatever. That is great.
But you don't want them to leave with a sense of thinking that was wrong, or that really shouldn't have happened for the wrong reasons.
Yes, yeah. Or the question of, why did you do that? It doesn't make sense, or it would have been so much nicer if.
Yeah, or it's not necessary.
Yeah. Okay, so we got to keep character, so that's good. And your proud moment. I mean, the whole book, of course, but that one shiny element.
Yeah, it's the very last page. It's not labelled as an epilogue, but it functions an epilogue because it's a jump forward a few years, and then we come back to some of the characters and we find out what's happened to them. And I think it's because it took me a lot of goes at writing an ending for this book. I probably did about 4 different endings, and none of them were working. And then actually that epilogue I wrote in a day. It just came to me, and I think I've barely changed a word in it, to be honest, all the way through the rewriting. And it just has an emotional resonance with me. So even though I know what's happening, because A, I wrote the book, and B, I've read all drafts of it so many times, honestly, every single time I read that ending, I cried. And I'm not a person that normally cries at books. It might have been crying at relief that I'd finished.
Full stop, the end. Yeah.
I texted one of my friends who's a writer, and her debut came out before, 18 months before mine. She's called Polly Crosby, and I said to her, every time I read this ending I cry, and she said, that means it's good. So I was quite happy to hear that. Yeah,
and that again, so beautiful to know that when you've taken us on that journey, and we get to that, and it's that last page, which but it's that moves you as the writer. So thank you. Getting a bit emotional thinking about you getting emotional. Yeah. You're not new. As you talk, you've generated questions. I'll do this one first. You're not new to writing or publishing, and I just wonder, but for writing a different genre, has the release of this book brought you something different? Has anything in the process been different in its release and the publicity around it, or how it's been received to your other books?
Yeah, I think it's made me aware that I am writing in a genre, and that there are expectations within that, and that it wouldn't do me any harm to try to work harder to both meet and confound those expectations, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I would say Deepwater's not your typical thriller, and some reviewers are saying that, and that's fine. I absolutely agree with that. So if someone says to me, this is more of a a slow burn in the central section, I don't take that as a criticism, because that's what I think it is. But yeah, so reading everyone's feedback and seeing it on social media and things, it definitely made me think about how to structure future stories. But I don't want to be writing something that's too formulaic. So yeah, trying to work out how I'm going to strike a balance between those in the future.
Yeah, lovely. And so speaking about craft and style, and I just wondered for Deep Water, and thinking about the fiction, the course that you did at UEA, is there any aspect from that course that finds itself in the book that you can point to and say, because I did that course, I did this with the novel?
I should think about that. So one really practical thing is, so it's a really techie craft point for writers. So if you're writing in third person, so you're naming your character, and you're trying to write in what's called close third, which is psychologically the reader is very close to that person's thoughts and feelings and emotions, but without being in their head like you would be a first person if it was an I this and I that. Then one trick is to not use their name very often on the page. And it's since it was a tutor that told me that, Jean McNeil, and since you told me that, I was really aware of how frequently I was using the character's name in my own work, but also when I read other people's. That can get difficult, because if, say, you've got a scene with two women in it, you're going to have to use their names to differentiate, because you can't just have she. Yeah,
which she is it? Yeah.
But there are ways that if you're always with the same protagonist, then it's kind of the reader assumes that she is the she, and then you could name the other character a bit more frequently when it needs it for clarification. So that's a really techie, geeky tip that I learned. But also to be freer, I think. Like we were talking earlier about writing news journalism. And how this is a completely different kettle of fish. So to be freer. But it's not like it's not like I went into a classroom and I was given and a teacher wrote on a whiteboard like a list, do these things and you will write a better book. A lot of it comes from workshopping other people's work, which is something that I was doing before I went there. So I was in a writing group in London. We all sort of circulated work and commented on each other's pieces. And I think that's where a lot of the learning happens, because you're reading all different styles and different approaches, and sort of subconsciously start to learn what's working and what's not working in your own work as well. So when I left, finished the degree, I thought, has that made me a better writer? And I couldn't have said in a tick box way yes because of these things. But yeah, undoubtedly it has. And my editor said she's seen a first draft of my new novel, my second one, and she said that my writing's come on in leaps and bounds, and I only started that right at the end of the course. So
thank you. Because again, when people share about how things have been for them and what happened, they're very personal things, so I really, really appreciate that. Emma, it has been an utter delight to spend time together. I really thank you for our conversation, for talking to us about Deep Water, and really all the very best, with it and subsequent work. Are you set to do some sailing again soon?
I'm in talks with somebody actually about maybe going down to South Africa. But I'm not going to quit my job. I'm not going to rent out my house or sell my car this time. I'll just go for a couple of weeks.
Wonderful. So I hope we get a chance to meet in real life at some event or something like that. But for now, just from all of us at the Doctor, we'll see you now. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's been really good fun. Thank you.
A pleasure. Bye for now.
Bye.